I think a lot of people are realizing they were always a freelancer. They just didn't own the identity. But look, after you've had 3 or 4 jobs in Silicon Valley over the course of 2 or 3 years, what else would you call yourself?
Ruslan.
Is a stable job today really that stable? Is it really that consistent? And is someone born an entrepreneur, or do they have to learn to be an entrepreneur?
Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Let's talk about this being a freelancer entrepreneur. Do you think it's something that's born, or is it taught? Is it learned?
I think the idea or the way that you choose to approach your vocation is 100% a choice. Obviously, there's inertia from what your parents did and the other people in your family and your friends. You take your cues from the stuff that's around you.
Yeah.
But there's enough out there today. There are enough examples of both, I think, for most anybody to sit back and say, do I have that entrepreneurial gene? Do I have a freelance gene? Am I going to be more comfortable with more certainty or security? But look, part of the thing that's for sale today, or really a big element of a grown-up conversation, is this idea that security still exists in the workforce the way it always has. I think it's pretty clear it doesn't. Whether you call it the new economy.
So in talking about entrepreneurs born or are they just taught, he goes on to say that, well, this notion that working for someone else or not being an entrepreneur, or not being an intrapreneur, or not being a solopreneur is all of a sudden
low risk.
Low risk. I think we've moved away from that a while ago. Like, I don't think there's many jobs that are quote unquote secure in the way they were 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can get fired from a job because revenue is down. That doesn't mean the business is going out of business. So you might be the first thing to go.
And subsequently, you could earn more at a job if you are going out and killing something and dragging it home and adding value to a company.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so I think that's the beauty of this conversation regarding entrepreneurship and the way people approach these sorts of conversations, is if you're approaching it from the perspective of like, I am going to produce, whether I'm an entrepreneur, solopreneur, intrapreneur, I'm going to produce and bring value. Oftentimes that is substantially more valuable than just someone that wants to just do a job and check out.
Totally. Well, the funny thing is that this is my first W-2 job, employee job ever.
Zach ain't get his first job, so he was like 25, guys.
So in high school, I started freelancing. And I started freelancing out the gate, saw some success, and was doing that full time. I get married at 21. And so my whole adult life, I was running my own freelance business. And that's what my wife was familiar with. So actually, when I was coming on here full time, she was more nervous because it was actually the opposite of what I've been doing. So she didn't even see my freelance business as volatile or not secure.
Wow.
She saw going to a real job or being a W-2 employee as something so new and brand new that there could be so much risk involved with that.
Interesting.
Which I thought was
different
such
generation.
a funny paradigm to be like, all we knew was freelance.
Yep.
So like that didn't shock us or scare us.
Yep. Wow.
But going to a W-2 job was something that she felt like was more scary.
Yep, that's good. And those of you guys that are here, I want to hear from you guys. How many of you guys are W-2, 100% W-2, meaning you have a job, taxes come out every paycheck? How many of you guys have some 1099 income, meaning that you're doing something on the side, some sort of side hustle, something that is coming to you as a contractor? And how many of you guys are 100% entrepreneurial? I mean, I'm technically, Ruslan is technically W-2 because I get a W-2 from King Stream. I'm an employee of my own company, basically, and so is my wife.
Or there are 1,000 different words for it. In the end, I think a lot of people are realizing they were always a freelancer. They just didn't own the identity. But look, after you've had 3 or 4 jobs in Silicon Valley over the course of 2 or 3 years, what else would you call yourself?
Yeah, well,
shots fired at Silicon Valley.
That's funny because there's so much turnover there. That's crazy.
so let's unpack that just a little bit. Not everyone's got the chops for the uncertainty. I mean, that's, I think, speaking from personal experience, one of the most difficult things. And so if you do make that conscious choice to pursue your dream, your passion, something that is not certain, and I think you have a good point. I think even if you think you have a steady job, you probably don't.
Right.
The rug could get pulled out at any time. Funding gets lost or whatever the case. But if you're working a traditional job and you have a boss, it's a little different than the folks that are living hand to mouth, or they are, you eat what you kill, that kind of mentality. Talk about some of those, what's difficult about that and how you maybe overcome it, how you have personally.
Well, personally, I've always thought certainty was overrated. It's critical, but the idea that you fall so in love with certainty that you start making all your decisions based on a known or quantifiable outcome, that's a sucker's bet. The truth is, if your life is filled with certainty, you're going to be bored. If you're normal, I think. In the same way that if your life is filled with uncertainty, you're going to be a nervous wreck. If you're normal. Most people, if they really step back and think about it, I think will agree that you need equal parts of certainty and uncertainty.
This is the beautiful part about being a person of faith, because oftentimes I would say the more like fundamentalist aspect, they would view their faith as I'm absolute certain, where we would acknowledge that faith is a confidence spectrum, a trust that Jesus is who he says he is, and therefore we can walk in that. But there's still a degree of mystery. There's a lot of stuff we don't know. There's a lot of stuff we don't know how the universe works, right?
Yeah.
Why certain things happen, why the problem of evil. I have enough confidence to place my faith in God's ways and in God's word and lean into it and live this out, but I'm not 100% certain. And then I believe that, again, I just always think Christians have an advantage. I believe that positions us to work in a place of both certainty and uncertainty, of that spectrum, right? So even when I came and I transitioned from working with adults with developmental disabilities and I got my first job at my church, when I was working at my church, like there was a degree of uncertainty. It was a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And there was also a degree of like, you have to generate, or I generated value by starting new things and specifically taking like 400 or 500 people through FPU, which then caused the giving to go up indirectly over time.
Nice.
And so I think that's one of those things where like it's still that entrepreneurial mentality, but you have to find that balance for yourself based on what season of life you're in.
Yeah, totally agree.
Go ahead.
Certainty of knowing that the sun is going to come up tomorrow, otherwise you're going to fall to pieces. But if every single sunrise looked exactly the same, right, it would kind of lose its wonder. So you need the uncertainty, which is just variety, and you need certainty, which is a measure of security. And if you've got that straight in your head, then I guess you can look around and decide, okay, I have 9 kids. Maybe I'm gonna hedge on the certain side, or maybe I don't have any kids, and maybe I do have an opportunity if I fail to really hurt no one but myself, and I'll bounce back. And so maybe you assume a bit more risk. I don't know, but honestly, I'm suspicious of anybody who does, because I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution. I think everybody's got to try and figure it out for themselves, and that means getting bumped around a little bit. You said something else before too regarding passion.
It's pretty good.
And when people ask me what I learned from Dirty Jobs, I always say that the long answer is a 400-page book I can't get around to finishing, but the short answers are many, and one of them is a kind of debunking of platitudes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
I think the part he said where, hey, I have 6 kids, I may need more certainty. It makes me think of Ryan Pineda. Shout out to Ryan Pineda, friends of the channel. I've been on his channel about my channel. And he like did everything opposite of me. Like I got out of debt. I made sure we had 6 months of living expenses, all that kind of stuff. And he just like jumped into flipping couches, maxed out his credit cards, jumped into flipping real estate.
Yeah.
So he also didn't have kids then. I think he was just a newlywed. And he knew, hey, I maxed out these credit cards, which I don't recommend you ever do. I was already in something pretty volatile, which was music. So I needed as much stability and confidence in my consistency doing music and media, where he was going into real estate out of being a professional athlete. He already had a high risk tolerance. And he didn't have any kids. So when he jumped into it, what's the worst that could have happened to him? Right? Now, I'm not advising this.
A couple of maxed out cards that he could pay off in a year or two.
Or just file for bankruptcy.
Or
No, I know. I mean, like,
stealing.
yeah. Or you pay off $100,000, $50,000 of debt, which I've done.
Yep.
Or you file for bankruptcy, right? And you have that on your record for 7 to 9 years.
Yeah.
But you're not going to jail.
Yeah.
You're not going to die.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is from the book, the Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. Like, you let your mind go to the worst possible conclusion of what can happen and go wrong. And then you ask yourself, am I okay with if this is what happens? Can I bounce back from this? Most people can bounce back from whatever the worst case scenario is or whatever they're afraid to do.
Yeah.
And so I think when you think about it that way, there's room to find that balance on what season of life you're in, right? I had Levi. Monette was a stay-at-home mom. I'm transitioning to being a full-time entrepreneur. I needed that 6 months of living expenses and no debt.
Totally. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was good because it gave us that cushion and that margin to transition. And I think as a Christian, most people probably need more of that than they do of the Ryan Pineda, I'm just going to go max out my credit cards, or Alex Hormozy, I'm going to max out my credit cards and go.
Because Christians already lean into the I think God told me vibes, and then they already have a lot of
They
this,
already feel like God told them to start this business and this vision.
Pseudo faith that might not actually have been a word from God.
Yes.
It was just their own brain telling them to jump into the deep end.
Yep.
Yeah, I think also approaching things there is no certainty, even if there is certainty, will probably get you further in your career than if you just was like, I got a job tomorrow and the next day and for the next couple of years. Like if you pull up acting like, oh, I could lose my job, or if revenue dips, I could have to take a pay cut, or I would have to go find another job. Instead, it's like, okay, if I want to raise in the year or by the end of the year, how do I increase the revenue and how do I go out and kill something? I don't think it's a binary. I don't think it's oh, you either work a job and it's certain or you have uncertainty. I think you bring a little bit of that uncertainty with you.
Yeah.
And then you might see some success even in something that's a little more certain.
I think about what we talked about last year. Remember when I was freaking out about YouTube potentially going under because of that Supreme Court case?
I do.
Do you remember that? And I was like, we have to diversify revenue streams, and we got to figure this thing out because we have to really think about worst case scenario. And what did we do? We made that huge push for Patreon. We created merch launches, and then we made our first product, which is Crushed, which is our prayer journal. And there was that uncertainty because I was being paranoid, which I think a certain degree of paranoia is good. There's a certainty of, dude, this can go to the Supreme Court, and if this law passes, then I don't remember what the law was in the particulars, but it basically allowed people to sue YouTube and social media companies for stuff that they had on their platforms that they all of a sudden had to become responsible for instead of just being independent distributors and not publishers. I freaked out, dude, and I was like, dude, this could be gone. Like June comes around, this could be gone. But I will say that maintaining that intensity, we did a live event. We did merch drops. We started the process of a book. There was a lot that happened, and then the second half of the year for us was just W after W after W. You know what I mean? Diversifying those revenue streams. And now we're always thinking like that. Thanks so much for watching that video. Listen, I believe one of the best ways to build any business or any venture is to build your own online presence, specifically through the platform of YouTube. That's what we've been able to do. So if you would like to see a free training put together by our COO, Zach Sparazzo, on the #1 ingredient and the step needed to begin to build your own online platform, make sure to hit the pinned comment below and sign up for our weekly email list, where we'll get that to you right away, and I'll be sending you different emails about lessons I'm learning in real time, doing everything that we're doing here at Kingstream Entertainment. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.